She never chose this life, but in the heart of the wild Montana plains, a reluctant bride and a fierce warrior discover that fate has plans neither of them could have imagined. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you like the story and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The year was 1851, and the vast Montana territory stretched out like an endless sea of grass beneath the clear blue sky. Morning Star, a young Cree woman of 20 summers, stood at the edge of her tribe's encampment, her dark eyes scanning the horizon. Her people, the River Cree, had been nomadic for generations, following the buffalo herds across the northern plains, but tensions with neighboring tribes had grown increasingly dangerous. "Morning Star," called her father, Chief Gray Wolf, his voice weathered by years of leadership. "The council gathers. We must speak of important matters." She followed him to the center of the camp where the elders sat in a circle, their faces grave. The summer winds carried whispers of conflict between the Cree and the fearsome Blackfeet warriors to the west. "Our scouts have returned," announced Gray Wolf. "The Blackfeet grow stronger each season. Their hunting parties venture further into our territories. Our people cannot survive another winter of battles." Morning Star listened intently, her fingers working a piece of deer hide. Though women rarely spoke at council, her father had always valued her insights. "What options remain for us, Father?" she asked when the council fell silent. The eldest of the council, White Crow, cleared his throat. "The Blackfeet chief has sent a messenger. They propose a treaty, peace between our tribes." A murmur rippled through the gathering. Peace with the Blackfeet seemed impossible after generations of conflict. "What terms do they offer?" asked a warrior with fresh scars on his arms. Gray Wolf's eyes found his daughter's. "They request a bond of blood, a marriage between our tribes." The silence that followed was heavier than winter snow. Morning Star felt her heart tighten in her chest as understanding dawned. "My daughter," Gray Wolf continued, his voice barely hiding his pain, "they ask for you to marry Swift Arrow, their most honored warrior." Morning Star's world seemed to tilt beneath her. Swift Arrow was known among all the Plains tribes, a fierce fighter whose name was spoken with both fear and respect. Tales of his battle prowess reached even the children's ears. "I have never laid eyes upon this man," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He is said to be the strongest of their warriors," offered White Crow. "His father was a chief before him. The union would bring honor to both tribes." That night, Morning Star sat alone by the river, watching moonlight dance across the rippling water. The weight of her tribe's future rested on her shoulders. "You should not wander alone," came a deep voice from behind her. She turned to find her cousin, Running Elk, his face half hidden in shadow. "The camp suffocates me tonight," she replied. Running Elk sat beside her. They had grown up together, more like siblings than cousins. "You could refuse," he said. "No one would force you." Morning Star sighed. "And what then? More raids, more deaths? Our children going hungry because we cannot hunt in peace?" She picked up a small stone and cast it into the water. "I have seen how my mother weeps when warriors do not return. I have helped bury too many of our people. But to marry a Blackfoot," Running Elk's voice trailed off. "Their ways are not ours, their lands are harsh. You would be alone among strangers. Perhaps this is how the Great Spirit intends to bring peace," she said, though her voice wavered. 3 days later, Morning Star stood beside her father as a Blackfeet delegation arrived. Their horses were strong, their demeanor proud. At their head rode a tall warrior, his face painted for the diplomatic meeting, eagle feathers adorning his long black hair. "Swift Arrow," whispered one of the Cree women behind her. Morning Star studied him carefully. His features were sharp, his gaze intense as he surveyed the Cree camp. When his eyes met hers, she did not look away. The meeting between chiefs was conducted with formal dignity. Morning Star was presented to Swift Arrow, who acknowledged her with a respectful nod but spoke no words directly to her. The terms of the treaty were discussed: shared hunting grounds, mutual defense against enemy tribes, and the marriage that would seal their alliance. As the sun began to set, Morning Star found herself alone with Swift Arrow for the first time, though still within sight of both tribes. "You are afraid," he said in halting Cree. "I am cautious," she replied, "as you would be if you were to live among strangers." A hint of surprise crossed his face. "You speak well for a woman." "And you judge quickly for a wise warrior," she countered. Something like respect flickered in his dark eyes. "Our peoples have shed each other's blood for generations, yet with one ceremony we are to become family. Do you believe it possible?" she asked. Swift Arrow looked toward the horizon. The buffalo grows scarcer. The white men push from the east. Perhaps survival requires new alliances. He turned back to her. "I will honor you as my wife. You will want for nothing in my lodge, except my people, my home. You will find new purpose among the Blackfeet," he said, "and perhaps, in time, a new home." Morning Star gazed at the man who would soon be her husband, wondering what fate awaited her in the Blackfeet camp. The future stretched before her like an unmapped territory, beautiful, dangerous, and unknown. The wedding ceremony took place at the border between Cree and Blackfeet territories, beside a winding river that had witnessed countless battles between the two tribes. Now, it would witness their union. Morning Star sat in her father's lodge as her mother and aunts prepared her. They braided her long black hair with strands of colored beads, dressed her in a deerskin gown adorned with intricate quill work, and painted sacred symbols on her hands to bring blessing and fertility. "You carry the hopes of our people," her mother whispered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "But remember, you are still my daughter. Your spirit remains Cree, no matter where you live." When Morning Star emerged from the lodge, the assembled tribes fell silent. Swift Arrow stood waiting, his tall frame adorned with symbols of his status, a grizzly bear claw necklace, eagle feathers, and a ceremonial headdress befitting a warrior of his rank. The ceremony blended traditions from both tribes. Prayers were offered to the Great Spirit in both languages. The couple's hands were bound with strips of hide from the same buffalo, symbolizing their shared future. When it was complete, Morning Star became a bridge between two peoples who had known only enmity for generations. The journey to the Blackfeet territory took 3 days. Morning Star rode beside Swift Arrow, acutely aware of the distance growing between her and everything familiar. With each passing mile, the landscape changed, the rolling hills giving way to more rugged terrain, the shadow of the great mountains visible on the western horizon. "Those are the backbone of the world," Swift Arrow told her, following her gaze to the distant peaks. "The Blackfeet have hunted in their shadow since time began. They are beautiful," she admitted, "but so different from my home. Different, yes, but perhaps not always strange to you." His words held no softness, but neither was their cruelty. When they arrived at the Blackfeet camp, Morning Star was struck by its size. Dozens of lodges spread across the valley, smoke rising from cooking fires, children running between them. The camp bustled with activity. Women scraping hides, men crafting weapons, elders teaching youngsters. Swift Arrow's lodge stood near the center of the camp, larger than most, befitting his status. Inside, it was well appointed with furs, painted buffalo hides depicting his battle honors, and all the necessities of plains life. "This is your home now," he said simply. That evening, a feast was held to welcome the new bride. Morning Star sat beside Swift Arrow as elders and warriors approached to offer gifts and blessings. She smiled and nodded, though she understood little of their language. An older woman approached, her face weathered but her eyes kind. "I am Singing Bird, Swift Arrow's mother," she said in broken Cree. "Welcome, daughter." The genuine warmth in the woman's voice brought unexpected tears to Morning Star's eyes. "Thank you," she replied. Later, as the celebration continued around them, Swift Arrow leaned closer. "My mother lost her own mother to a Cree raid when she was young," he said quietly. "Yet she learns your tongue to welcome you." Morning Star looked at him, surprised by this personal revelation. "Perhaps there is wisdom in both our peoples that the other does not see." The following weeks were a difficult adjustment. Morning Star struggled with the Blackfeet language, though she improved daily with Singing Bird's patient instruction. The other women watched her with curiosity and sometimes suspicion. Some welcomed her, teaching her their ways of preparing food and tanning hides. Others kept their distance, their memories of Cree attacks too fresh. Swift Arrow himself remained something of a mystery. He treated her with respect but maintained a certain distance. Each morning he would leave to hunt or to train younger warriors, returning in the evenings with little to say. They shared a lodge but lived parallel lives. One evening, as they sat before the fire, Morningstar finally broke their usual silence. "Do you regret this arrangement?" she asked directly. Swift Arrow looked up, surprised. "Regret? No. The treaty benefits both our peoples." "I didn't ask about the treaty," she said. "I asked about me, about us." He studied her for a long moment. "You are brave and strong-willed. These are good qualities in any person, man or woman." He paused. "But trust between us will take time, Morningstar. Our people's blood has soaked the same ground for generations. Then perhaps we should begin building that trust," she suggested. "Tell me of your life before we met." Surprisingly, he did. That night, Swift Arrow spoke of his childhood, of learning to hunt with his father, of his first buffalo kill at 12 winters. Morningstar listened, recognizing in his stories echoes of her own upbringing, though in a different tribe. "And you?" he finally asked. "What was your life among the Cree?" She told him of growing up as the chief's daughter, of learning medicine plants from her grandmother, of the responsibility she felt toward her people. As she spoke, she noticed him truly listening, his usual stoic expression softening slightly. In the days that followed, something shifted between them. Swift Arrow began teaching Morningstar to ride in the Blackfeet style. She showed him healing herbs that grew in the valley, knowledge passed down through generations of Cree women. One afternoon they rode together to a high ridge overlooking the plains. Below them, a herd of buffalo grazed peacefully, unaware of their observers. "My father brought me here when I was a boy," Swift Arrow said. "He told me that the Blackfeet would hunt these lands until the stars fell from the sky." "And what do you believe?" she asked. "I believe the world changes whether we wish it or not," he replied. "The white men's numbers grow. The buffalo become fewer. Perhaps our children will know a different life than we have known." It was the first time either had mentioned children, and the moment hung between them, full of unspoken possibility. As they rode back to camp, a sudden summer storm broke overhead. They took shelter in a small cave, watching as lightning split the darkened sky. "In my tribe, we say that lightning is the Great Spirit reminding us of his power," Morningstar said, wrapping her blanket tighter around her shoulders. Swift Arrow nodded. "We say it is the Thunderbird's wings striking the sky." He hesitated, then moved closer, sharing his buffalo robe with her. Different words for the same truth. Morningstar looked up at him, seeing for the first time not the fearsome Blackfeet warrior of legend, but simply a man, complex, thoughtful, and perhaps as uncertain of their future as she was. "Perhaps," she said softly, "we are not so different after all." Winter came early that year, blanketing the Blackfeet territory in deep snow by the time the moon of falling leaves had passed. Morningstar had now spent half a year among her husband's people, and with each passing day, the strangeness of her surroundings diminished. The Blackfeet language no longer sounded foreign to her ears, and her hands had learned new patterns for beadwork and quillwork that differed subtly from Cree traditions. Most surprising to Morningstar was the change in her relationship with Swift Arrow. What had begun as a political arrangement had gradually evolved into something deeper. They had not spoken of love. Such explicit declarations were uncommon among their peoples, but actions told what words did not. Swift Arrow now sought her counsel before tribal meetings. She had begun to recognize the rare, slight curve of his lips that served as his smile. One bitter, cold evening, as wind howled outside their lodge, Morningstar worked by firelight, teaching a group of young Blackfeet girls the Cree style of porcupine quill embroidery. Swift Arrow watched from across the fire, his expression thoughtful. "You have won many hearts here," he said later, after the children had gone. "Even Three Bears speaks well of you now." Three Bears was one of the tribal elders who had most strongly opposed the treaty with the Cree. His son had died in a raid years earlier. "Time changes many things," Morningstar replied, setting aside her work. "Though not all." "What troubles you?" Swift Arrow asked, noticing her pensive expression. Morningstar hesitated. "I received news from the trading post. A Cree hunter brought word that my mother has fallen ill." Swift Arrow's face remained impassive, but his eyes softened with understanding. "You wish to see her?" "Yes," she admitted. "But I know the journey would be difficult in winter, and—" She paused, unsure how to express her deeper fear, that returning to her people even briefly might be seen as a betrayal of her new life. "We will go when the snow lessens," Swift Arrow said simply. "Family is family, regardless of tribe." His understanding touched her deeply. That night, as they lay beneath warm buffalo robes, Morningstar reached for his hand in the darkness. It was a small gesture, but one that bridged the final distance between them. When the weather cleared enough for safe travel, Swift Arrow assembled a small party to journey to the Cree winter camp. The trip was arduous, the snow deep in places, but they pushed forward steadily. "Are you nervous to return?" Swift Arrow asked as they made camp on the final night of their journey. "Yes," Morningstar admitted. "I left as a daughter. I return as—" She searched for the right word. "As a woman who has found her path between two worlds," he finished for her. The next day, as they approached the Cree camp, Morningstar felt her heart racing. Smoke from lodge fires rose into the clear winter sky. A sentry spotted them and called out. Soon, familiar faces emerged to greet them, cautiously at first, then with growing warmth as they recognized Morningstar. Her father, Chief Grey Wolf, stood tall despite the additional silver in his hair. When Morningstar dismounted and approached him, protocol momentarily gave way to emotion as he embraced his daughter. "You have been in our prayers," he said, his voice rough with feeling. Swift Arrow and his warriors were welcomed with formal courtesy. The peace had held these 6 months, bringing benefits to both tribes, and the arrival of the Blackfeet party was treated with appropriate diplomatic respect. Morningstar found her mother resting in the family lodge, her face thinner than before, but her eyes bright with joy at her daughter's return. "The sickness has passed," her mother assured her. "It was my heart that needed healing more than my body. Seeing you strong and well is the best medicine." Over the next days, Morningstar moved between worlds, sharing meals with her family, introducing Swift Arrow to Cree customs, carrying news between women of both tribes. She noticed how her husband observed everything with keen interest, asking thoughtful questions about Cree ways. On their third evening in camp, a feast was held. After the meal, as was tradition, stories were shared around the central fire. When it came time for Swift Arrow to speak, a hush fell over the gathering. "I came here knowing the Cree only as enemies," he began, his voice carrying in the night air. "I return now knowing them as family. This is what one woman's courage has taught me." His gaze found Morningstar across the fire, and the look that passed between them needed no translation in any language. Later that night, walking together under the stars, Morningstar finally spoke words that had been growing in her heart. "I did not choose you," she said softly, "nor you me. Yet I would choose you now, if given the choice again." Swift Arrow took her hand, a rare public display of affection. "As would I," he replied simply. Their return journey to the Blackfeet camp was lighter somehow, despite the continuing winter hardships. Something had been resolved between them, and within Morningstar herself. She no longer felt torn between two worlds, but instead had begun to see herself as a bridge between them. Spring came early that year. As the snow melted and the first green appeared on the prairie, Morningstar shared joyful news with Swift Arrow. She was carrying their child. The prospect of new life, born of both Cree and Blackfeet blood, seemed the fulfillment of the treaty's promise. Yet as her belly grew with their child, worrying rumors reached the Blackfeet camp. White settlers were moving into territories further east in greater numbers. Government representatives had been meeting with various tribes, speaking of new arrangements, reservations, and treaties that would change everything. "What does this mean for our peoples?" Morningstar asked one evening as she and Swift Arrow sat outside their lodge, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains. "Change comes whether we welcome it or not," he replied, his hand resting protectively on her rounded belly. "But our child will carry the strength of two tribes. Perhaps that will be needed in the days to come." In the moon of ripening berries, Morningstar gave birth to a son. Following both Cree and Blackfeet tradition, they waited 7 days before naming him. On the 7th morning, they took the infant outside to greet his first sunrise. "What shall we call him?" Morningstar asked, cradling the baby in her arms. Swift Arrow looked at his son, then to the eastern horizon where the rising sun was breaking through storm clouds that had lingered for days. "Two skies," he said. For he lives beneath both the Cree and Blackfeet heavens and will find his way in both. Morning Star smiled, feeling the rightness of the name. Two skies, she repeated softly. Son of Peace. 5 winters had passed since Morning Star had first come to the Blackfeet as a reluctant bride. Now, as she watched her son, Two Skies, running alongside his father, she marveled at how completely her life had transformed. The boy embodied the best of both tribes, his father's strength and his mother's compassion, Blackfeet hunting skills and Cree storytelling traditions. The treaty between their peoples had held firm, creating a powerful alliance that had allowed both tribes to prosper, despite increasing pressures from white settlement. Twice yearly, delegations traveled between the camps, trading goods and stories, strengthening the bonds between former enemies. Morning Star had grown into her role not just as Swift Arrow's wife, but as a respected voice among the Blackfeet women. Her knowledge of healing plants had saved lives during a fever that swept through the camp 2 winters ago, earning her the respect of even the most traditional elders. Yet change was coming to the plains, faster than anyone had anticipated. Government representatives had arrived at both Cree and Blackfeet territories, speaking of treaties that would restrict their movements to designated lands. Reservations, they called them. They do not understand our ways, Swift Arrow said one evening as they sat with the tribal council. They speak of farming when our life follows the buffalo. The buffalo grow fewer each season, reminded Black Kettle, an elder whose wisdom was respected by all. The iron horse brings more white settlers each year. My father sends word that the Cree face similar demands, Morning Star added. They are told to choose land now or lose the choice entirely. The council debated long into the night. Swift Arrow, now one of the tribe's leading voices, argued for caution, neither immediate acceptance nor outright rejection of the government's terms. Later, alone in their lodge, Morning Star found Swift Arrow unusually pensive. What troubles you beyond what was spoken in council? She asked, knowing her husband's expressions better than anyone. Swift Arrow sighed. The treaty with the white government would separate our peoples. The Cree would be assigned lands to the northeast, the Blackfeet to the west. The alliance we built. His voice trailed off. Morning Star felt her heart tighten. They would separate us? After all we have built? Not us specifically, Swift Arrow clarified. But our peoples would no longer share hunting grounds. The visits between camps would become difficult, requiring permission to leave the reservation boundaries. And what of families like ours? Those who have married between tribes? Swift Arrow took her hand. That is my greatest concern. The paper men do not understand such bonds. They see only Cree or Blackfeet, not both. The following months brought increasing pressure from government representatives. Leaders from both tribes were summoned to Fort Benton for discussions. Swift Arrow, as one of the Blackfeet's most respected warriors and emerging leaders, was chosen to represent their interests. I wish to accompany you, Morning Star told him as he prepared for the journey. Swift Arrow looked surprised. It will be many days of difficult travel, and the white men rarely include women in their councils. I am Cree by birth, Blackfeet by marriage, she replied firmly. Our son is both. If they speak of separating our peoples, both voices should be heard. After consideration, Swift Arrow agreed. They left Two Skies in the care of Singing Bird, now a doting grandmother, and joined the delegation heading to the fort. The meeting at Fort Benton was unlike anything Morning Star had experienced. Representatives from several tribes had gathered, along with government officials in formal attire. The discussions were conducted primarily in English, with interpreters translating for the native leaders. Morning Star sat silently through the first day of talks, observing everything. Though women rarely spoke in such forums, her presence was noted. She caught the curious glances of the white officials and their wives, who seemed fascinated by her Blackfeet clothing combined with Cree beadwork patterns. On the second day, when discussion turned to the proposed boundaries between tribal territories, Swift Arrow rose to speak. For 5 winters, our tribe has maintained peace with the Cree, he began, his voice strong despite speaking through an interpreter. We have intermarried, shared hunting grounds, and defended each other against common enemies. The government official, a man named Henderson, nodded politely. The United States government recognizes the importance of these relationships. However, For effective administration, clear boundaries must be established. Swift Arrow gestured toward Morning Star. My wife is Cree by birth, the daughter of Chief Grey Wolf. Our son carries both bloodlines. There are now many such families. Where do they belong in your paper boundaries? Henderson seemed momentarily at a loss. Generally, in such cases, the wife would be considered to have joined her husband's tribe. Morning Star felt a surge of indignation. Without planning to speak, she found herself rising to her feet. I stand before you as both Cree and Blackfeet, she said clearly in English, surprising everyone, including Swift Arrow. She had learned the language from traders over the years, but rarely used it. My son is both. The peace between our peoples was built through such bonds. Your boundaries would cut through family ties that cannot be severed by lines on paper. The room fell silent. Henderson cleared his throat. Madam, your English is impressive. Your concern is noted, but the reservation system requires defined territories for each tribe. Then perhaps the territories should overlap, suggested Morning Star. A shared land where those of mixed heritage may live according to both traditions. The idea sparked intense discussion, though initially dismissed by the officials over the coming days, as more tribal representatives voiced similar concerns. A compromise began to take shape. The final agreement was far from perfect. Both the Cree and Blackfeet would indeed be assigned separate reservation lands. However, a provision was included allowing for travel between the territories for those with family connections, and a small corridor of land between the two reservations was designated for families of mixed heritage. As they journeyed home, Morning Star and Swift Arrow discussed what this would mean for their future. It is not the freedom our ancestors knew, Swift Arrow acknowledged, but it preserves a path between our peoples. And for our son, added Morning Star, a chance to know both sides of his heritage. When they returned to the Blackfeet camp, they found the tribe already preparing for the move to their designated reservation lands. The prospect brought mixed emotions, grief for the nomadic life that was ending, anxiety about the future, but also determination to preserve their ways within the new boundaries. Two Skies ran to greet them, his face alight with joy at their return. As Morning Star embraced her son, she felt the full weight of what they had fought for at Fort Benton, not just for themselves, but for him and the generations to follow. That evening, as the three of them sat outside their lodge watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Two Skies asked a question that caught both parents by surprise. Father says I am Blackfeet, the boy said. Grandmother says I am Cree. Which am I? Morning Star and Swift Arrow exchanged glances. It was Swift Arrow who answered. You are Two Skies, he said, drawing his son onto his lap, named for the two worlds that gave you life. In times to come, others may try to make you choose between them. But remember this, you need not choose. Your strength comes from both. Morning Star reached out to take her husband's hand, their fingers intertwining just as their lives had done, not erasing their differences but weaving them into something stronger than either could have been alone. The treaty that first brought us together may change, she told her son. Boundaries may shift, but some bonds cannot be broken by words on paper. As darkness fell and the first stars appeared overhead, Morning Star looked at her family, at the life built from what had begun as political necessity. The path ahead would not be easy. The reservation system would bring hardships their ancestors had never known. But in the firelit faces of her husband and son, she saw hope for a future where the best of both their worlds might survive. Tell me a story, Two Skies requested as he did most evenings. A Cree story or a Blackfeet story? Tonight, said Morning Star, drawing him close, I will tell you a new story about a Cree woman and a Blackfeet warrior who found love where they expected only duty and built a bridge between two peoples that not even the white man's boundaries could destroy. Swift Arrow's hand tightened around hers as she began the tale of their own unlikely journey, a story that would be passed down through generations of children with both Cree and Blackfeet blood, long after the original treaty had faded into history.